was something to do with the green monkeys or something from a African state somewhere.
Well, it came from Africa originally.
I was told America. I don't know how it was first developed. It was first recognised in, was it Los Angeles or San Francisco, one of the two. But presumably it must have been around in homosexuals for years.
It's what to do with the Africans and the Americans and drugs and all that, all combined into one.
I don't have any strong feelings one way or the other. I personally find homosexuality repugnant, the actual physical act of it.
Do you think it's just guys?
No.
Some innocent people can catch it.
I should imagine it could reach epidemic proportions, I don't know.
I think it's disgusting. Yourself?
There was a lot of talk that you get it through saliva. There's some drinking out of cups that people who've got AIDS have been drinking out of, yeah. But I don't know whether that's actually true or not. I don't think it is.
If I forget it, I'll get it. There's nothing I can do about it, is there?
What have Everton and AIDS got in common? Don't know. Heard of 3 years ago.
They weren't heard of 3 years ago.
That's a great technique.
Practically the only way you can actually contract AIDS or pass it on is through blood contact or through sexual activity.
It's a terrible thing. Unless they come up with an answer, it's going to kill a lot of people.
Firemen are cramping doing as well.
The MSC has been paying the Oxford Filmmakers Workshop to make a documentary film about AIDS called AIDS, the Myth and the Reality. Jonathan Maitland has been along to the workshop studios to see how the film is shaping up.
Slate 5, take 1, action.
Oh, look at this bit here. It says women are now victims. Well, I didn't know women could get it.
Everybody's just got it doing as a gay plague or something, haven't they? Look at Africa in general. There's 50,000 people dying of AIDS.
Yeah, but it's mainly gays, though.
No, it's not.
Just one of the improvised scenes from the film which has already caused quite a stir in the local press, even though it's some 12 weeks from completion. Fact, fiction and sensational newspaper headlines have combined to create an atmosphere of public paranoia about the disease. So wasn't making a film like this only going to make matters worse?
We hope not. The main reason for the film, in fact, is to debunk some of the hysteria about AIDS. As an example of the hysteria created by the press, we feel is a recent article printed at one of the local Oxford papers, which has the headline, "Trainees Shock AIDS Film." We don't really feel this is very constructive because this is exactly the sort of thing we're trying to work against.
You get something that lots of people get, isn't it? It's something
That bubonic plague, I mean, millions of people have died. I mean, it started in early 1985. It exists to inform and advise and support those at risk from the virus. When it started, we thought in terms of high-risk groups, which has now become obsolete. The entire population is at risk. We consisted, to start with, of representatives from the gay organisations, because it has been gay people principally who have been committed, apart from the Haemophilia Society, who have their special approach, been committed to actually fighting the spread of the disease. Originally, we divided our responsibilities between OxAIDS and Oxford Body Positive. Oxford Body Positive was founded for those people who turn out to be serum antibody positive, so that they can emotionally support each other, run social functions and the like. We hear stories of gangs with iron bars going out to kill fucking queers, using the epidemic as their excuse for doing so. It has encouraged an already present paranoia about homosexuality, which didn't need much encouraging. On the other hand, I think that given the way that certain public figures have been forced tragically out of their closets by dying very publicly of AIDS and having to reveal they were gay, it has made people realise that gay people are just ordinary human beings like anybody else. And a lot of sympathy and I think a lot of active help has been given by non-gay people who in the past didn't realise they knew anybody gay and didn't care.
When you're using drugs, your sense of responsibility goes and you don't really care that you might die. that's one of the biggest problems with drug users and things like hepatitis, overdoses and the HTLV-3 virus. Well, when you first start to use drugs, it all seems very exciting and glamorous and perhaps a little rebellious or whatever. It's an insidious thing that creeps up on you over a period of time, and the more you use drugs, the less you're in touch with what reality really is and what's happening to you. I will have physical problems for the rest of my life because of my drug use, and I wasn't actually injecting, so you don't have to inject to mess up your life and mess up your body.
Says Vicar. You know, I mean, surely it's up to God to say things like that, you know.
I think God was heterosexual then.
Well, it looks as though heterosexuals can get it, because look, the women suffer from
Drug users catch AIDS through sharing syringes, because if traces of an infected person's blood are left in the syringe, and then someone uses the same syringe, they'll be injecting the AIDS virus straight into their own bloodstream. And it's just about impossible to sterilise a syringe, especially the plastic disposable kind.
So anyone to know that you're using it, you want to pick it up.
Everyone, especially young people, are surrounded by sexual pressures from the media, films, advertising, parents, friends. Pressures telling us to have sex, not to have sex, to get a girlfriend if you're a boy, to get a boyfriend if you're a girl, to wear the right deodorant, clothes, smile to attract the opposite sex. So to prove our femininity or masculinity, with the ultimate goal being marriage. Men have the pressure to get drunk and pull a bird. Women have the contradictory pressures to sleep with men to prove that they're not frigid, and not to do so to prove that they're not slags or tarts.
Fortunes that are spent and made on smoking and drinking are phenomenal. More cash is spent on advertising smoking and drinking than is spent into looking into the effects these drugs have on the body. And the media and gutter press aren't chasing the drinking tobacco barons and telling us that these people are evil the way they do about AIDS victims.
Maybe drinking provides a way by which people can escape the problems of thinking about the pressures, by getting too drunk to care. While gay men generally seem to be aware of the risks of catching and spreading AIDS, straight people don't seem to want to see it as their problem. In New York, 1 in 3 people with AIDS are straight.
Or perhaps it's like this vicar says, it's God's judgment on a society that is not only legalised, it's taking...
And this particular virus, the HTLV-3, attacks certain cells in the body, what we call the T helper cells. The cells which are necessary to provide immunity against certain types of organisms. The organisms that it particularly protects against are viruses and yeasts, fungal infections, and protozoal infections. When AIDS actually develops, these simple infections become life-threatening. We call them opportunistic infections. They've taken the opportunity of the loss of the body's immunity to seriously...
Then you're liable to be physically or verbally abused or even arrested. People are still very shocked by the sight of men or women kissing or cuddling passionately.
Where beauty and beauty met, earth's still a tremble there, and winds are scented yet, and memory soft the air, bosoming, folding glints of light and shreds of shadowy laughter, not the tears that fill the years after.
AIDS isn't caused by homosexuality, it's caused by a virus. whether it's the Jews being blamed for the Black Death or the Irish being blamed for cholera in the last century, there's always a way of finding a stigmatised group, a group which isn't necessarily in a position to defend itself, and blaming them for something which is useless in terms of actually doing something to keep people healthy, but does make people feel a lot better briefly because they feel that something isn't their fault.
The plague began to increase about us, and I had many sad thoughts about what course I should take and how I should act. The many dismal objects which happened everywhere as I went about the streets had filled my mind with a great deal of horror, for fear of the distemper itself, which was indeed very horrible in itself, and in some more than others. The swellings, which were generally in the neck or groin, where they grew hard and would not break, grew so painful that it was equal to the most exquisite torture, and some, not able to bear the torment, threw themselves out of windows, or shot themselves, or otherwise made themselves away. And I saw several dismal objects of that kind. Others, unable to contain themselves, vented their pain by incessant roarings, and such loud and lamentable cries were to be heard as we walked along the streets that would pierce the very heart to think of, especially when it was to be considered that the same dreadful scourge might be expected any moment to seize upon ourselves. I must here take further notice that nothing was more fatal to the inhabitants of this city than the supine negligence of the people themselves, who, during the long notice and warning they had of the visitation, yet made no provision for it.
It's partly public information, telling people how they can get the virus, how they can't get the virus, making sure that people are aware of safer sex, of the dangers of sharing needles, and also reassuring people that you can't actually get it from sharing a room or sharing a glass or being in the same family as someone who's got the virus. And then working with the health authority and the city council in planning what sort of effects AIDS is going to have on, say, the services that are being provided, whether it's the actual medical services in terms of the number of beds that are going to be needed, or training staff so that they'll be able to deal with people coming with inquiries who've got AIDS or are antibody positive, looking at things like hospice care, just going around and trying to work out what the effect of AIDS and the virus is going to be over the whole community. I think the whole attitude to AIDS has changed considerably over the last 18 months. I don't think a job like this would have got the sort of support, both politically and from the press, that I've seen this one get. It's been very much a sense of Oxford's doing something, why isn't the government? I think it was almost inevitable that somebody doing this job would come from an at-risk group, because the vast majority of work that's been done on AIDS in the last 2 years has been done by voluntary workers, especially gay men. Obviously, it's important that if you are sexually active, you are thinking about AIDS at the moment, because as the virus spreads, it's going to be much more difficult to be sure that the people you're coming into contact with aren't going to have been affected by it. You're not necessarily going to know, they're not necessarily going to know. Anyone in this country now who's having sex with anyone who's had sex with anyone else in the last 5 years is at risk of contracting the virus. AIDS is an issue that everybody ought to be concerned about. If we don't do something by the end of this century, then there isn't going to be a person in this country who isn't affected in some way, not because they've necessarily got the virus, but because their friends, the people they work with, their family are affected. We all need to inform ourselves it just now affects you if you have risky sex or if you share a needle.
I think it's quite sick the way money's poured into arms all over the world, when if even a small proportion of it was fed into health and research, we might all be a lot better off.
We spend billions of pounds annually on weapons. Even children are hounded into warfare. Young boys are encouraged to buy toy guns and other weapons. Even a lot of video games are based on some kind of warfare.
Haemophiliacs have in the past been regarded as an at-risk group. Is this still the case?
It's unlikely that any haemophiliacs will be infected in the future, as all the blood used to prepare their factor VIII, used to prevent their bleeding, has been tested. Now, quite a number of people have got infected by that virus, but by no means all of them have developed AIDS, nor are all of them likely to develop AIDS. Now, AIDS occurs when the body's immunity has been seriously damaged and almost destroyed. What AIDS is, it's life-threatening, opportunistic infections and the development of opportunistic tumours. The result of AIDS is that the person is likely to die within 2 years.
I also think we're facing a problem with the medical profession generally, because AIDS is incurable at the moment. There isn't a vaccine.
There is no need for people to go to their GPs if they're worried about the AIDS virus. They can go directly to the Harrison department, and there are 1 or 2 good reasons for doing this. Doctors naturally take notes about their patients, and even if your present GP respects confidentiality, there is no guarantee that your next GP, to whom the notes are passed on, will respect confidentiality. In any case, your GP is the person to whom insurance companies go to ask about your state of health. So there are very good reasons for going to the Harrison department, where records are kept absolutely confidential.
We went to the Harrison department at the Radcliffe Infirmary on Woodstock Road to talk to the health advisors there and to the consultant physician, Dr. Galway.
AIDS is the late complication in some people of infection by a virus. The virus is one that we call HTLV3. That stands for the human T-cell lymphotrophic virus number 3.
We asked the health advisors, Sue Trotter and Jenny Harrison, what happened if you came to the Harrison department and said you thought you might have AIDS. They made it clear that there is no such thing as an AIDS test. All they can do is find out whether you have at some time come into contact with the virus. They do this by testing your blood to see if it's produced antibodies to the virus. Antibodies are what the body produces to fight off disease. This is what is called the HTLV3 antibody test. Dr. Galway explained that if the tests come up positive, there are a number of different possible outcomes.
The vast majority of people at the moment who have been infected by the virus have no problems at all. They just have no symptoms and no signs of there being anything wrong at all. About 10 to 20% will develop AIDS within 2 to 5 years. An additional 20 to 30% will develop moderate to severe ill health.
The health advisors strongly emphasise that the antibody test should never be conducted without counselling and advice, both before and after the test, that everyone nowadays, gay or straight, male or female, needs to carefully consider their sexual lifestyles and what they can do to avoid catching or passing on the virus.
What we advise people to do to avoid any chance of contracting the infection, of catching the virus, is to stick to what we call safer sex. Now, safer sex is really any sort of sexual contact which does not allow the exchange of blood or semen. Unsafe sexual practices in gay men are associated with anal sex, whether that's insertive or receptive anal sex. We also believe that oro-anal contact may be risky. In straight people, safe sex is to avoid unprotected vaginal intercourse, particularly with casual partners, with multiple partners, and with partners who come from known at-risk areas.